A teenage social media influencer allegedly stabbed her ex's new lover more than a dozen times. Now, as the victim's in critical condition at a hospital, the suspect could be facing a shockingly lenient sentence if she's convicted in the attack. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Authorities in Mexico say an ex-girlfriend spotted the father of her baby with a new woman, and that is when things turned very, very violent. According to police, 17-year-old Marianne Gonzaga stabbed 18-year-old Valentine Gilabert more than 10 times, leaving her in just dire condition. According to the Latin Times, Valentina's father says his daughter suffered wounds to her left lung, chest, right lung, neck, head, hands. Valentina was recently in an induced coma in a hospital, but according to the Mexican news outlet Infobay, she has woken up. Now, on February 5th, Gonzaga reportedly traveled to Mexico City from Cancun, saw Valentina with a man named Jose Said Barricel. She reportedly became enraged because, you see, according to the Medium and Daily Mail, Barricel is the father of Marianne's 6-month-old baby. And based on reporting from local media outlets, Gonzaga and the baby's father, they were no longer in a relationship, but they both wanted to be involved in the baby's life. And it's believed that Gonzaga might have gone to Mexico City, possibly to try to reconcile based on some of her social media posts. But to talk more about this, I want to bring on trial attorney Janine Atamian. Janine, thanks so much for coming on. It's great to see you. Janine and I used to be on together all the time when we were on the network together, but it's good to have you here on Sidebar. So we're still piecing together a lot of the story and trying to understand it. But when you think about this, right, and we've covered a number of cases, jealousy, relationships, love, you take these allegations as true. Isn't that one of the central themes of violent crimes?
Yeah, it could be a crime of passion because she was upset that her fiance was not going to stay with her. They had just had a baby, I think, 6 months ago. The other thing, though, is it's her perfect life that she portrays on social media was falling apart. You know, here he is with another girl, and she's been doing all this stuff about having a baby and being a young mother and this glamorous life she leads. And I think that was also threatened. We're
going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the social media aspect of it. But going back to the story, according to outlet SDP Noticias, Gonzaga was arrested and at her first hearing in front of a judge where she was bound over to trial on a charge of aggravated assault. Now, the victim's family is calling for that charge to be reclassified and upgraded as attempted homicide or femicide, which is the killing of a female. And according to La Verdad Noticias, Valentina's attorney claims that Gonzaga was previously threatening Valentina before, including on social media. And Valentina's father told media outlets that Barricel and his daughter weren't in any kind of formal relationship yet, but that apparently didn't stop Gonzaga, according to authorities. And according to a prosecutor's report obtained by local media, Valentina was stabbed somewhere between 10 and 15 times with 2 kitchen knives. It's not exact what the number is. We've seen mixed reporting on it. And needless to say, this is a pretty gruesome attack. And the report and the leaked photos show she had several stab wounds that I mentioned, including to her hands, from where it seems it could be argued she was trying to protect herself. By the way, I want to tell you about something real quick, another concerning issue. So recent allegations against the multi-billion-dollar video game industry claim that video games are engineered for addiction. Yeah, the claims are about trying to make sense of the hold that video games seem to have over people where they just can't put the controller down. Every win triggers that hit of dopamine that creates a cycle of compulsion, and that disrupts daily life and it harms mental health. But our legal sponsors are taking on the industry that has at many times allegedly put profit over safety, and they are working to potentially get compensation for all of those impacted. So if you or a loved one have suffered physical or mental health issues due to video games, then visit vgclaims.com/sidebar to answer less than 10 questions and check your eligibility to file a claim. Now, police believe that Barricel had left the apartment with a friend to run to the store, and that's when Gonzaga allegedly broke into the apartment, started allegedly stabbing Valentina, and when Barricel returned, he found the crime scene, called police. Now, there is also an interview that has been circulating online with someone who was allegedly inside the apartment when this purported attack happened, and according to that person, who has not been identified, Gonzaga actually started recording the aftermath of the attack on her phone. She reportedly escaped the scene, was arrested hours later at an apartment. Janine, what stands out to you about this?
For me, it stands out the most how gruesome it was. This is a very glamorous influencer on social media. She stabbed this woman so many times. She stabbed her hand that there's a possibility that it may have to be
yes.
Allegedly, yes. Yeah. But there's a possibility that it may have to be amputated. And the gentleman that was supposedly there has been leaking certain voice notes from that whole situation. And she's screaming at her, "This is what you get for being a whore," and different things like that. And so to me, I think it's going to be a very hard road for her attorneys.
And I want to get to the age aspect too, because of juvenile court, adult court. But the idea, when we talk about attacks that are up close and personal, stabbing attacks, let alone committed by somebody or allegedly committed by somebody so young, I find that to be just so incredibly chilling. It's difficult, the idea of attempting to take a life, or which she's not currently charged with, but attacking somebody in this fashion. The idea of thinking about that up close and personal attack, but committed or allegedly committed by somebody so young, I don't even know what to make of that, Janine.
And it's even worse because you got to think she's got not one but two knives, and she's repeatedly stabbing this girl. According to the gentleman that was there, at one point she stopped because she thought she had died, and she started choking on her own blood, and he had to turn her over, and she was going back for more. So it is really kind of upsetting to think that such a young girl could do such a thing.
And talking about the charges here, so in the Mexican legal system, it's our understanding, an assault is classified as aggravated when it meets one or more of the following conditions. Again, this is our understanding of Mexican law. Either premeditation, so if the attack was planned in advance; use of a deadly weapon, if the aggressor used an object that is capable of causing severe injury or death; treachery, if the victim was caught off guard and couldn't really defend themselves; advantage, if the attacker had a clear physical, situational, or strategic advantage over the victim; and then special victim status, if the victim was a minor, elderly, or in a vulnerable position. And La Verdad Noticias reports that Marianne's lawyer is claiming self-defense, saying that Valentina attacked Marianne Gonzaga first, and that the stabbing was not premeditated, and she lacked intent to cause serious harm. Her attorney reportedly told the court that she was remorseful for her actions. So Janine, in cases like this, whether it's, in Mexico or in the United States, how difficult is it for a defense attorney to convince the court or a jury or a judge that an attack was self-defense, particularly when there's evidence of multiple stab wounds and possibly a premeditated attack?
Well, again, you were talking about it earlier. She also supposedly threatened this particular woman. And then a month prior, she had an altercation with another woman where she supposedly threw a bottle at her. So this kind of seems like a habit with this young lady. And again, she traveled from Cancun to Mexico. It really does seem premeditated. She knows that they were together because there's social media posts of him with this new girl. So I think, again, they have a very uphill battle. Also, this is a very powerful family. The victim's family is very powerful. Her grandmother was a beloved telenovela star, Juliana de la Garza. I'm probably pronouncing that incorrectly. But this is a family that has the means and that, wants justice for their daughter.
100%. And I will tell you this, when we talk about self-defense, obviously it would be one thing for Gonzaga to testify and say this is why the attack happened. What physical evidence would you be looking for in a case of self-defense?
I would be looking to see, does she have any injuries? Was there any witness to Valentina attacking her first? Any defensive wounds? Anything like that? But I haven't heard anything about that. And the other thing I heard the defense is thinking about doing is saying that this was something postpartum depression-wise or postpartum, and that she wasn't of a proper mental state. So there's a couple of different theories that are kicking around for what they're going to say.
Now, by the way, let's go to the big issue here about what happens if she's convicted. Because Gonzaga is under the age of 18. Her case is being dealt with in Mexico's juvenile court system, and it's called the National Law and the Comprehensive System of Justice for Adolescents. So she's locked up in juvenile detention. She's going to apparently stay there for at least a couple of months as the defense team builds her case. But Marianne Gonzaga's potential punishment for allegedly stabbing Valentina more than a dozen times, or more than at least 10 times, has caused some outrage. Why? Because she was 17 when this attack happened. And it's our understanding, we're getting kind of mixed reporting on this, but either she could face possibly no prison time, maybe no more than 5 years in prison if she's convicted, depending upon how these charges are ultimately characterized. And it would be very different if they were upgraded if she was an adult, because if she was an adult, I think she could face up to 35 years in prison. At least, again, this is our understanding of Mexico law. Janine, your thoughts on this? Because we've talked about here in the States, how the difference between juvenile court and adult court, and sometimes you have a minor who is charged and convicted of a crime, but because it's in juvenile court, the crime doesn't change, the injury doesn't change, the loss of life doesn't change, the attack doesn't change, but they may have a drastically different punishment than if they were charged as an adult. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so this is a little concerning for me because, again, I'm kind of getting myself familiar with Mexican law. And supposedly, if she were to live, they would not have any jail time necessarily for attempted homicide. Okay. If she died, it's a potential for 5 years. So there was a lot of outrage and a lot of social media outrage. And there was a push to have her charged with another crime that was the aggravated assault and trying to get that in there. And that would actually get her some jail time. But there is a possibility this girl can walk. Additionally, in Mexican law, from what I understand, you can actually negotiate a plea deal with the victim for compensation, and you can kind of settle that way. And that is something that her lawyers have indicated they're looking towards doing.
Is that because you don't want to overrun the court system? Hey, if you guys can come with a negotiated settlement, we don't have to take this to trial, which, I mean, in our system doesn't work that way, right? I mean, there's the interest of justice. There's the state is, the prosecutors are acting on behalf of the state when a crime is committed or allegedly committed. You don't just say, just got to pay it off and, that's it. We're going to wipe our hands of it.
No, it doesn't make sense at all, especially because if you have a lot of money and she's, an influencer with 65,000 followers, you could basically buy your way out of a crime that you committed. So it's really, really foreign to us in the United States. But apparently this is a possibility, and it's something that her attorneys are hoping as one of the options for her.
Can we talk about that a little bit? Because when we say social media influencer, a lot of people will probably roll their eyes because it seems anyone with any online presence deems themselves an influencer these days. But Marianne Gonzaga actually had the ability to reach a substantial audience with her photos, her videos. She modeled various outfits, jewelries on TikTok, where she describes herself as a mommy blogger. Each of her videos, it's our understanding, has more than 5 million views. That is a really large platform for somebody who's now accused of such a brutal attack. And she had this significant social media presence with millions of views on her TikTok videos. You wonder, could her online persona play a role in her case, both in terms of public perception, how the prosecution and the defense might approach her character? I mean, again, I don't know the rules of evidence in Mexico, but how would it play here in the United States?
Well, so actually, in Mexico right now, there's two schools of thought with regard to this specific situation, because some people are saying that influencers are given a more lenient situation when they do commit crimes. And there's been multiple situations where it's either fraud or something like that, and they've gone easier because of the celebrity of it all. And then there's a lot of people who are saying if she were a male, it wouldn't be the same situation for her. So there's two different parties kind of arguing that out. But again, this is somebody who's gotten into trouble with her social media for being deceptive. She posted a house that was a mansion that supposedly she bought with this ex-fiance, and a gentleman came forward and said, no, that's my house. That's not your house. I live there. So she's got some issues with regard to that as well. And right. That's something to think about as well.
No, I hear you. And I'm curious about that because, well, also, I don't know what the rules of jury selection are in Mexico too. But if you have a pretty big social media influencer, aside from the people who might know her, but people have strong opinions about social media and social media influencers. That could hurt a jury selection, right?
Yeah, it could be hard to find an unbiased jury, right? Because there could be people who follow her or people who really dislike her or people who just dislike the idea of social media influencers in general.
Let me ask you this, going back to the minor adult aspect of it. Where do you stand on these types of crimes? Again, if she was in the United States, innocent until proven guilty, but the idea that I said, like the actual crime doesn't change, the attack doesn't change, but if you are dealing with somebody who's younger, do you think in a case like this that it should remain in juvenile court, not adult court? I mean, there's a lot of studies and the science would say maybe a brain isn't fully developed, maybe somebody doesn't appreciate what they're doing. We have to treat minors differently. Then again, 17 is different than 7.
This is a 17-year-old. This is also a mother. This is not some 12-year-old. This is someone who has adult responsibilities. And again, she took really gruesome action. And if it's true, she hacked this woman. It's really terrible what happened to this person. And I don't think it's fair to say just because she's 17 that she should not have to face the consequences for her actions, because I'm sure that the victim is going to have to face these injuries and whatever repercussions or whatever stays with her from that.
Do you think, though, there's an argument, and I'm not suggesting this one way or another, but I guess the other argument would be for juvenile court, if you can push rehabilitation and you could push for a younger person to get the mental health treatment that they need in order to become a member of society again, is there a benefit, a public interest argument that it's better to try to rehabilitate somebody that way than sending them off to prison and going into adult court?
Well, again, so my personal opinion is that it's twofold. Part of it's rehabilitative and part of it's punishment. And so to me, I don't think that just because she's a juvenile, she shouldn't face punishment. Maybe it can be a lesser punishment, but 5 years does not seem like a long time to me for what she did if she was convicted. If she's guilty, that to me does not seem like an appropriate punishment for the alleged crime.
The victim's family is calling for this charge to be upgraded. If this case were in the United States, Janine, how likely is it that it would be upgraded based on the circumstances we know of the crime so far?
Oh, I think it would absolutely be upgraded because, again, the violent nature of it. This is not, somebody who stabbed her once. She stabbed her, I think, up to 15 times. She punctured her lungs. There's a story going around on the internet saying that she tried to cut off her breast. I mean, it's really a gruesome, horrible situation. And I think in the American judicial system, it would be treated as such.
And I guess also the reports about multiple weapons used in an attack like that. But again, you wonder if a defense attorney would say, look, she's multiple weapons. She's trying to get anything she can to defend herself. The multiple weapons I thought was an interesting characteristic if the reporting's true.
No, that absolutely is. It seems strange that she supposedly went and got a second knife. I don't know why she would get a second knife. But again, just the nature of the crime. You know what? If it's self-defense, she could have stabbed her and then tried to run away. There's nothing that shows that she tried to run away. And when that gentleman supposedly comes in, she's not running away. She finally runs away to another apartment and changes her bloody clothes. It's not like she's calling the police and saying, here's what happened to me. I need help. She's kind of trying to hide the evidence.
I cover cases all the time where families advocate for upgraded charges, or families advocate for the death penalty, or families advocate for life in prison. How much do prosecutors, how much sway does that have over prosecutors? How much does what the family wants dictate what the prosecutors do?
Well, I think that it definitely does weigh on a prosecutor. And again, going back to in Mexico, since you could basically create a settlement yourselves between the victim and the aggressor, to me, I think it's going to hold a lot of weight. And from what I understand, the prosecutors are trying that, and the family is adamant. And, they've launched different websites. They want justice for their daughter. And so I do think that comes into play, and I think it should come into play.
You mentioned this before. In this case, there are reports of leaked photos of Valentina's injuries and the media reports of her condition, which are pretty awful. And in the U.S., if that happened, could such leaks, first of all, are they illegal? And could they affect the jury pool? Could they impact the fairness of this trial? Talk to us about that.
Well, I mean, in the United States, absolutely, because it would depend on how, far they would put out there. Like, did a lot of people see them? Were they on the internet? Different things like that, because you want to have a jury that's not going to be biased. You don't want to have this prejudiced information affecting what a jury will ultimately decide. So it is a big factor here. I don't know if it's a big factor there.
I don't know either. I also don't know what the rules are on leaking information like that. Other than morally objectionable, I don't know what the rules would be on that. But I will ask you this. If we talk about the aggravating factors, which we've mentioned before, the use of multiple weapons, stabbing multiple times, really just a heinous attack, talk to me about the mitigating factors. What do I mean by that? If we're talking about leniency, her age, is it the fact that, let's just take these facts as true, she shows up there, she stabs this woman, you're in this highly emotional state. How many times in law school do we talk about the idea of somebody comes home, they see their partner in bed with somebody else, they're cheating, they immediately run and get a gun and shoot them to death? That can lower a murder charge to manslaughter because it's heat of passion, heat in the moment. Are there mitigating factors here? She's a mother. Let me talk about that. So in terms of a sentence, right? So mother, I'm not justifying this. Let me be clear. I'm not justifying this. What I'm saying is there ways that this could be mitigated where, she's a mother, sees the father of her baby in a relationship with somebody else, sees that person, she's 17 years old. Are these factors that could result in leniency?
I definitely think they could, because again, her attorneys have indicated that they're going to talk about her age. They're going to talk about her mental state. They're going to talk about potential postpartum depression. They're going to talk about all these different things. First, they're saying it's self-defense, but then they have other theories. And the other theories do help her mitigate because she is young. She is emotional. I think the baby was 6 months old and, he leaves her and he's posting all this on social media. They have this whole social media presence together. And I think that would definitely be a factor.
she has to take the stand, right? It's her decision. But I've always believed that in self-defense cases, if this is really going to be argued like this, and again, I don't know what the rules are, taking the stand in Mexico, but I imagine for her to get the stand and explain what was going on, that might be key.
Yeah, it might also be the end of her for her to get up on that stand and testify. So, it's difficult. There was supposedly some recording on her phone. So if the recording could be helpful for her, there were other people in the room at different times. So that could be helpful to her. If she gets up on the stand, again, she's going to be subject to a rigorous cross-examination. And she doesn't have a lot of factors that are in her favor with regard to this. It's 15 or so stab wounds. It's very hard to say that that's self-defense.
I feel bad for her child, right? I mean, that's just what a difficult situation this is. It's just a distressing case for a number of factors, how young we're talking about with a victim and defendant here, and, a baby in the mix as well. So, Janine Atamian, thanks so much for coming on. My gosh, you're like an expert in Mexican law. You know all about it right now. So thank you so much for taking the time. It was great seeing you.
Nice to see you.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.